All right, we're going to use greatest common factor today to factor a polynomial. So we have to look and see if there's a number that they have in common. So we look for the greatest common factor if we can see it. So like 7 is a 7 and a 1, and this is 7 and a 4, so 7's our biggest, so we can take out a 7. And then you look, is there any letters in common? And yes, they have one x in common. This has two x's, this only has one, so we can only take one. So if I divide this piece and this piece, so it's kind of like you're writing it underneath it, but you don't really have to write it underneath it. You're visualizing this going into this. 7 goes into 28 4 times. And if you have two x's here and you take one of them, you're left with one x. And how many 7x's are in a 7x? 1, and the sign in the middle is a negative, a minus sign. So then we look here, and we look at all the numbers, and they all have a 6 in common. They don't have all x's in common because of this right here. So all we can do is take a 6 out. So if we divide each of these pieces by a 6, we're left with x squared. How many 6's in 12 is 2 with an x. How many 6's in 24 is a 4 with an xy. Notice how I'm just putting the signs there because unless you pulled out a negative, it wouldn't change the signs. And 6 goes into 36 6 times. So that's your answer there. And if we look at the next one down, it's a little more complex because if I look, I have a 21, a 7, and a 42. Well, I see a 7 in common. And this has got three x's, x to the third, x to the second, and an x, so I can only take an x out. And this has two y's, that has one y, that has one y, so I can at least take one y. So if I take a 7 out of a 21, I've got 3. If I take an x out of an x to the third, I got an x to the second left. And if I take a y out of a y squared, it's like, remember, subtracting the powers because we're dividing here. We're left with 1. Now I have my minus sign. 7 goes into 7 once. X squared and an x, that leaves me with 1 left over, and my y's canceled out, so there's no y's. 7 goes into 42 6 times. I took the x, I took the y, it's only a 6. And remember, if you need to write the 7xy underneath each piece and do the dividing out like this, like we did before, you totally can. Okay? It's up to you. So here they have a 4 in common. This has 5 x's, this has 3 x's. So I can take the minimum amount of x's is 3, and I could take all the y's. So if I were to divide both of these pieces by 4x3y3, I'm left with an x squared. The y's are gone. And if I divide this, I take the whole thing. So I'm left with just a 1 because this goes into this one whole time. And last but certainly not least, now remember, if I'm going too fast, you just need to rewatch it. They all have a 3 in common, and they all have at least one x. So if I take out a 3x out of each of these, now if you need to write it, you need to. It's up to you. We are left with an x squared left because 3 goes into 3 once. 3's take away 1. 3 goes into 30 10 times, and I'm left with an x still. And 3 goes into 75 25 times. The x is canceled out, and it's a minus sign, so we leave it like that. And as always, this is Miss Bobby, and I love math. Diet Coke and CrossFit.